In this module, we'll be talking about the ketogenic, otherwise known as the keto diet, and low carb diets. We'll start with the ketogenic diet, the different types, the standard, the other variations, the ketotarian, what are the health benefits and risks, and then we'll switch over to the low carb diet. What's included and omitted, what the variations are, and what the health benefits and risks are for that plan. And then end with the practical takeaways. So let's dive into the keto diet. The standard ketogenic diet has a goal of switching our primary fuel source from glucose to fat through a process called ketosis. Now this switch can take place about 3 to 4 days of eating less than 20 to 50 grams of carb. So what does that mean? So you need to follow a low carb diet for a couple days before your body will traditionally switch over from using glucose to fat for fuel. Because remember, we have a specific storage of glycogen, so we have to deplete that before we're going to switch over to using fat. Our history lesson, in 1911, there were 2 French doctors that authored the first scientific report on fasting as a treatment for epilepsy or seizures. In the 1920s, Russell Wilder with the Mayo Clinic invented the ketogenic diet to mimic these effects of fasting without actually having to fast. So this again was directed more towards epilepsy and seizures, but making it a little bit easier on the individual. So what does the ketogenic standard plan involve? It's a macronutrient split of high fat, traditionally 70 to 80% of the diet coming from fat, low carb, 5 to 10% of the total calories coming from carb, which is going to equivalent to less than 50 grams a day. Now we're going to talk a little bit about net versus actual carbs as we talk about ketogenic. So this is typically going to be an actual carbohydrate load of less than 50 grams a day. If you decide to go with the net carb direction, which is one of my favorite ways to go, it would be taking total carbohydrates minus fiber equals net carb. So that gives you a little bit more leniency to get more of those plant-based foods in for the phytonutrients and antioxidants and health beneficial properties that they have without going past your carbohydrate recommendation. And then low to moderate in protein. So 15 to 20% of the calories coming from protein. So ketogenic sometimes gets misguided thinking that it's a high protein. It's not high protein. As you can see, it's actually low to moderate in protein. It's high fat, low carb. Because too much protein can take us out of ketosis. So if we remember back to our macronutrient modules of carbohydrate, protein, and fat, carbohydrate being our preferred fuel, when we don't have enough of that, we're going to go next to fat because protein is got so many critical functions in our body that we really want to preserve that. We don't want to be burning protein. So if we're not taking in too much protein, we will now convert over to fat. Versus if we have too much protein, we risk using protein for our fuel versus the fat. Hopefully that makes sense. And then what's included in the ketogenic diet? Meat, which beef, ham, pork, poultry, processed meats, fatty fish, eggs, butter and cream, cheese, nuts and seeds, oils and avocado, herbs and spices, and a minimal amount of low-carb vegetables. What's omitted? Anything sugary, beverages, soda, candies, desserts, grains or starches, fruit, beans, legumes, root and starchy vegetables, most condiments, barbecue sauce, ketchup, teriyaki, because they have sugar in them, and alcohol. So all of these things are going to put too much of an impact on the sugar load coming in. So that's going to take us out of ketosis very quickly. So now there's a couple variations of ketogenic. One is called cyclical ketogenic, and this is geared more towards athletes. And it's a period of higher carbs in between ketogenic cycles. So for example, you follow the ketogenic diet for 5 days, and then you have 2 days of a higher carbohydrate load. And along those lines, there's another variation called targeted ketogenic, which again is used more for the athletic populations. So you add additional carbs around the times of intense physical activity. So really giving the body the fuel that it needs to drive activity, but then coming back into ketosis outside of those intense exercise times. And then the high protein ketogenic would be 60% fat, 35% protein, and 5% carb. So remember, we talked about the standard ketogenic is lower to moderate in protein. There is a high protein option, but remember where we may have a little bit tougher time driving our fat for fuel if we have more protein in the diet. Now let's talk about another variation. I'd have to say, in my opinion, this is my favorite variation of the keto diet, and that's called ketotarian. So it's a hybrid of ketogenic and vegetarian. So it's plant-based. It's a loose vegetarian diet, so it does allow eggs and ghee and fish and shellfish, but it excludes most of the other animal proteins, except for the above. It omits inflammatory seed oils like corn, soy, and vegetable, and it also omits the nightshade vegetables like tomato, bell peppers, hot peppers, potatoes, eggplant, and that's because we want to take the lesser load on the GI tract. The macro split for ketotarian is still high fat, 70 to 75%. It's low carb, less than 5%, so 25 grams of net carbs, and 20 to 25% of protein, so moderate protein. What else does ketotarian involve? Fruits, but in limited quantities, ideally just your lower glycemic options like your berries. Non-starchy vegetables, so there's no starchy or root vegetables. Unsweetened, non-dairy milks. Proteins, more coming from your seeds like flax, hemp, and chia. Natto, tempeh, spirulina, and plant-based protein powders, as well as your eggs and fish. Fats are going to be primarily from olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, nut butters, nuts and seeds, avocado, olives, and ghee. Now there's little research conducted around ketotarian. It's a newer kid on the block, but it is generally a healthier variation of the ketogenic diet with more focus on the colorful antioxidants and phytonutrient-rich vegetables, lower inflammatory sources like our dairy and our processed meats, which again is going to help lower the oxidative load, lower inflammation, and drive general well-being and health long term. So this is going to be more beneficial in regards to our health long term. So what are the health benefits of ketogenic? So now I'm coming back to the general ketogenic diet. Appetite suppression. When we start using fat for fuel through ketosis, that will actually blunt our appetite. So we'll be fuller longer, we'll eat less. It reduces our risk for neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Reduces seizures, which is what it was originally created for. Reduces metabolic conditions like obesity and type 2 diabetes. It's actually used as a first-line approach to regulating these metabolic conditions. But remember, we do need to have lower calories for weight loss to occur. And normally with a ketogenic diet, because it's so much more satiating with the high fat, which is not going to affect our blood sugars, and it's going to keep us fuller longer, we will naturally reduce our caloric intake, but not always. I have certainly worked with folks on the ketogenic diet who don't end up lowering their calories and actually gain weight and body fat. Now there was a 2019 report from the American Diabetes Association that showed benefit with type 2 diabetes over 2 years. They showed to reduce the hemoglobin A1C level by 1% and weight by 26 pounds. So one thing that we have to think about when you're following a specialized diet like this, if you have a medical condition and are on medications, you want to work closely with a practitioner, a licensed practitioner that can help monitor with you. So make sure to let your medical practitioner know, but you may also want to invest in working with a licensed nutritionist who can guide you through this and help you monitor what your blood sugars are, what your blood pressure is, so that if you need modifications and medications, you can be directed back to your doctor for that guidance. It's also been shown to be an ancillary treatment for cancer. So the Warburg effect may starve the cancer cells without being toxic to normal cells. And it also, remember, is reducing our insulin, which is a driver for cancer proliferation. So in regards to the cancer cell proliferation. So those are some of the health benefits of the ketogenic diet. What are some of the adverse effects? So this, we're first talking about side effects, not necessarily health risks, but what might you experience if you're following the ketogenic diet? Some experience what's called the keto flu. And this is normally in the first week or so of transitioning from your normal diet, especially if it is a higher carbohydrate to a lower carbohydrate, high fat diet. You might feel a little bit more headachy, nauseated. You might feel a little bit more irritable. So if that is the case, if you drink more water, you eat nutrient dense foods, that should help move things along quicker so that you don't feel so debilitated in those first couple days to week. Muscle cramping, bad breath, and that's again all related to the ketosis that's being driven. Constipation because the fiber is lower, and it can be difficult to sustain. And so if you're going on this plan and then you're going off the plan, then you're going back on the plan as a reset, remember that the yo-yo dieting effect is actually more detrimental to our health long term. So we really want to establish a pattern that is sustainable, that we can maintain, and that is healthy. We're getting everything we need nutritionally, and it works within our lifestyle, and we enjoy it. Now, what are some of the health risks around ketogenic? There is a lack of high quality clinical trials and long-term safety studies out there. If you're on medications, as I already mentioned, to lower your blood sugar or blood pressure, make sure you're monitoring those levels closely and working closely with your medical practitioner. Make sure you stay on top of it so that if you need to lower those doses, you can do so proactively. Lack of micronutrients, antioxidants, and phytonutrients. Again, that's from the lack of plants in the diet, but it really depends on how you are directed into doing this plan, and why I'm a fan of the ketotarian, because we're still encouraging a lot of those phytonutrients and antioxidants in our plants. High intake of processed meats. So your traditional ketogenic diet does not omit processed meats or dairy. So we may have a lot of processed hot dogs, ham, bacon, sausage, and high fat dairy, and those are very inflammatory and can cause issues to our health long term. In the case of processed meats, it's been shown that the salting, smoking, and curing processes have been carcinogenic, so can drive cancer. High intake of red meat has been correlated with cardiovascular risks. And then long-term low-carb, high-fat diets are hypothesized to increase inflammation, oxidative stress, and accelerate aging. So again, I think, we have to listen to our bodies, use intuition, trial something. But especially with the ketogenic diet, I know most people have a group of people that they have done this with, or that they have seen do this plan, and everybody has a wide variety of results. And that's really reminding us that we are all biochemically unique and N of one. So how do you feel on the plan? Are you getting everything that we talked about in the nutritional modules? So if so, then that's a safer and healthier plan long term. So we really have to think about what these plans are made up of. Ketogenic long term may induce insulin resistance. So kind of ironic. In the short term, it's shown to reduce insulin resistance and help us lose weight. Long term, they're finding it might be the opposite, and it probably has something to do with what we talked about in the fat module with lipopolysaccharides and the endotoxemia that is driven from those higher fat diets. So again, more is not better. Longer is not necessarily better in all of these types of diets or plans. And that's where you might want to think of these plans as a diet, short term, or a pattern or a plan, which is more long term and sustainable. Another risk is that it can change our water and mineral balance. So you may need to supplement with salt and minerals while on the ketogenic diet. So speaking of that, in regards to potential supplementation, you can use MCT oil or exogenous ketones to help urge your body into ketosis a little bit easier and earlier. Also minerals, adding some salt, adding some trace minerals can be very beneficial while you're doing the ketogenic diet. So what's the bottom line? There's strong evidence for short-term benefits in regards to obesity and type 2 diabetes. It's a therapeutic first-line approach to epilepsy or seizures. The long-term safety is unknown. So it may increase insulin resistance, morbidity, mortality, inflammation. We need more long-term studies. So what I would suggest is opting for cycles of ketogenic and or the ketotarian approach as a safer venue. Okay, with that in mind, let's switch to a variation of kind of the ketogenic, which is a low carb diet. So this is a little bit different in that it is still restricting carbohydrates like the ketogenic diet does. So it can be 50 to 100 grams a day. So that is a restriction compared to the standard American diet, but it is definitely higher than your ketogenic, which is the 20 to 50 grams a day. And your focus is going to be more on your vegetables, some fruit, minimal starches and grains. So remember, when we eat less carbohydrates, we reduce our insulin level, which will release water and sodium. And so we're going to have a quicker weight loss, more related to that water weight loss. The low carb diet is higher in protein and fat and non-starchy vegetables than the ketogenic diet is. What does it include? A lot of the same things as ketogenic: animal proteins, eggs, non-starchy vegetables. It does include fruit, nuts and seeds, high-fat dairy, and fats and oils. What does it omit? Sugars, refined grains, trans fats, low-fat products, because those are going to be higher carb, processed foods, and starchy vegetables. So what are the potential health benefits? Fast weight loss. And this is in comparison to a low-fat diet. So there's several studies out there looking at the duration of 12 months or less. And they have definitely seen a lower carb diet trumps in regards to a low-fat diet with weight loss. Can support heart health. And what's interesting here is it's more on the quality of our lipoproteins versus the quantity. And so with LDL or lousy cholesterol, what has been shown with a lower carbohydrate diet is it increases the size of our LDL particles and it decreases the number. And how I like to use that as an analogy in regards to the quality is for the size of the LDL particles. So think about playing tennis and you're a really bad tennis player and you're using ping pong balls or you're using softballs, but you're constantly hitting the net. Which ball is going to go through the net? It's going to be that small ping pong. So that smaller size is going to penetrate the endothelial layer in our arteries, causing more inflammation and damage to the arterial wall. So that's negative. So here we're saying, well, we increase the size, so it's not penetrating. When we talk about the number of particles for LDL, think of traffic jam. The more people that are driving solo, we have more cars on the road, more traffic jams. So same thing here. If we are carpooling, less cars, less traffic jams. So more particles, more traffic jams. We're decreasing those numbers with the low carb diet. HDL or happy cholesterol, we're increasing HDL with the higher fat intake. And triglycerides, we're decreasing because those are going to be driven more by your sugars and carbohydrates in the diet. So heart health wise, there's a lot of good support with a lower carbohydrate diet. Also, reducing the risk for metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. So we're reducing blood sugar and insulin levels. So what are the potential adverse effects? Some common symptoms of a low carb diet because of the loss of sodium, just like we talked about with ketogenic: fatigue, lightheaded, muscle aches and cramping, and headaches. So consider adding salt back into your diet if you are following one of these lower carbohydrate plans. Celtic or Redmond's will be your better options, not iodized. What are some of the health risks? If you're not following a low carbohydrate diet properly, and this is in regards to nutritionally properly, that's going to cause a lower fiber intake, lower antioxidants, lower phytonutrients. Now we're at risk for digestive issues, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, and ultimately chronic health conditions. So long-term use without attention to the type and quality of proteins and fats may increase our risk for heart disease and cancer. So with that, what are our practical takeaways? So whether we're thinking of the low carbohydrate diet or the ketogenic diet, whether you're guiding somebody in your practice or you're interested in trying one of these yourself, think of them more as a short-term reset. So if you desire a quicker weight loss or you need to manage your blood sugar or insulin levels, use these plans as a 1 to 3 month reset. Focus on quality, quality, quality. Quality matters, especially when it comes to your animal proteins and your fat sources. And build around your colorful plants. I really encourage every single person, no matter what you're doing, to still strive for 50% of your plate from colorful, non-starchy plants. Lots of leafy greens, lots of other colors. So even on a ketogenic, so you could go ketotarian, or you could go ketogenic with net carbs, do a little bit higher carbs on the low carb diet, just so you can get that amount of phytonutrients and antioxidants through your colorful, non-starchy plants for long-term health and wellness. Think long-term. Try to take the blinders off for short-term. You do want to reset, but let's think long-term. How do I build those sustainable, health-promoting patterns within my diet and my nutrition? So hopefully that helped answer any questions around the ketogenic and low carb diets, and look forward to talking to you next time.